62 cents in a checking account versus a private jet, and $1 billion fortune welcome to the race for Ohio's highest office.
Oh, it is just an absolute wild contrast to look at.
It really is. And, you are looking at a state that is preparing for a massive political showdown.
Right, because the current governor is out.
Exactly. Mike DeWine hit his term limit. He cannot run again. So that leaves the 2026 race completely wide open.
Wide open and highly contested.
Yeah, and the two leading candidates fighting to replace him, they present just, well, one of the sharpest contrasts in modern American politics. On the Republican side, you have Vivek Ramaswamy.
Right.
And on the Democratic side, you have Dr. Amy Acton. We gathered a massive stack of sources to break down this deep dive for you today.
We really did. We're pulling from recent polling data, state financial disclosures.
Which are fascinating.
Oh, totally.
Okay.
Plus, Wikipedia backgrounds, local news articles, and actual social media reactions.
Yeah, because our mission today is to unpack the intense contrasts, the surprising controversies, and the razor-thin margins that are shaping this election, and we are doing it completely impartially.
Right, just sticking to what the sources actually show us.
Exactly. So let's start with the ultimate contrast, right? Because voters face a choice between two completely different realities here.
Yeah, and we learn the most about those realities by just opening up their 2025 state financial disclosures.
The money always tells the story.
It really does. State law forces candidates to show where their money comes from. And Ramaswamy's disclosure, it literally reads like a corporate prospectus.
Yeah, it's not a normal tax return.
No, not at all. He built a $1.8 billion fortune starting a biotech company. It's called Roivant Sciences. And last year alone, he earned over $1.1 million just in dividends and capital gains.
Wait, 1.1 million just in dividends?
Just in dividends and capital gains, yeah.
Which means his money is basically making money. Dividends and capital gains operate completely differently than, a standard salary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, and he also made $769,000 simply from selling stock in BlackBerry.
BlackBerry, wow. Okay. Plus, the disclosures reveal he actually owns a private jet. He runs it through a leasing company, but still, he operates in this absolute stratosphere of wealth.
He really does. But then, you turn the page to Dr. Amy Acton's disclosure.
And it is night and day.
Literally night and day. She reported exactly 62 cents in interest from her checking account.
62 cents?
Yeah. And she drives a Jeep Wrangler.
Yeah.
The campaign, they aggressively highlight her working class roots. She grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, surviving childhood poverty.
And homelessness, right. The sources mention periods of homelessness.
Yes, dealing with periods of homelessness. And she paid her own way through college and medical school. So you essentially have the billionaire who built a massive corporation standing right next to the doctor who fought her way out of poverty.
It's crazy. The casting feels almost too perfectly opposite, right? Like some heavy-handed movie script.
Yeah, like it's written by Hollywood.
Exactly. But you dig into the fine print of those financial disclosures, and that neat little narrative kind of falls apart.
It's just a snag, yeah.
Because Acton is a public health doctor. She ran the state health department. Yet her financial disclosures show she actually owns stock in major tobacco companies.
Right, which is a massive red flag for some people.
Yeah. She holds investments in Philip Morris, the company making Marlboro cigarettes and Imperial brands. So you see a public health doctor holding Philip Morris stock, and you immediately scream, hypocrites!
Naturally, yeah.
But I look at modern investing, and I have to ask you, is she actively day trading tobacco, or is this just like a standard mutual fund that caught her in a PR trap?
It is almost certainly the mutual fund scenario.
Yeah.
That catches politicians constantly.
Because they just buy a block of stocks.
Right. When you buy a broad health or an index fund for your retirement, you often accidentally buy these tiny fractions of companies like Philip Morris.
So she didn't necessarily log into E-Trade and buy Philip Morris directly.
Most likely not. But the thing is, political campaigns, they do not care about the mechanics of index funds.
No, they care about the optics.
Exactly. Acton has to defend owning tobacco stock while running on public health. Now, on the flip side, Ramaswamy faces his own narrative hurdles.
Because of the wealth.
Right. Opponents constantly attack his extreme wealth. They argue a billionaire cannot possibly understand the struggles of an everyday Ohioan, trying to pay for groceries.
So how does he actually counter that? Because a billionaire telling a working class voter, hey, I feel your pain, that usually backfires pretty hard.
Oh, he doesn't do that at all. He flips the script entirely. Ramaswamy frames his immense wealth as an aspirational tool, not a barrier.
Interesting. How so?
He tells voters his wealth gives him ultimate independence. He argues that because he does not need donor money, he owes the political establishment absolutely nothing.
Ah, so he pays his own way to stay off the leash.
Precisely. He wants to run the state like a business, and he says his fortune proves he knows how to generate success.
Okay, so let's look at how voters actually digest these two approaches. Because the polling data right now shows an incredibly tight race.
It's basically a dead heat.
Yeah, aggregate polls currently show Acton holding a very slight lead. She's averaging 47.5% to Ramaswamy's 45.2%.
Right.
A 2.3% margin is basically a coin toss.
The top-line numbers show a tie, sure, but the underlying demographics, they tell a completely different story.
Okay, break that down for me.
So a recent poll from the Ohio Federation of Teachers dug into net favorability. Acton holds a massive plus 14 net favorability rating.
Plus 14, wow. And Ramaswamy.
He sits at just plus 1.
That is a huge gap.
It is. And more importantly, Acton dominates among independent voters. She leads that demographic by a 21-point margin.
A 21-point margin. And independent voters literally decide statewide elections in Ohio.
Exactly. It's a glaring warning sign for the Ramaswamy campaign.
So what is actually driving those independent voters toward Acton?
Well, independent voters usually gravitate toward pragmatic problem solvers over, ideological crusaders. And their policy platforms really reflect this divide.
Right.
Ramaswamy's platform focuses on very aggressive economic growth. He wants to eliminate the state income tax and the state property tax.
Wait, eliminate both of them entirely?
The entire thing, yeah.
But that requires a massive structural change. I mean, a state pays for roads, schools, emergency services, using those exact taxes.
Right. So if you cut the income tax entirely, you have to rely heavily on supply-side economics.
Okay, so you assume cutting costs for businesses will attract so many new companies to Ohio that the resulting sales tax and corporate revenue will basically fill the massive hole left by the income tax.
Exactly. It is the ultimate CEO mindset, trimming the fat, driving growth. Now, Acton takes a completely different path.
She leans into the doctor angle.
She does. She focuses on everyday affordability, specifically targeting healthcare costs. She wants to utilize Medicaid more efficiently and create state tax credits for family caregivers.
Let's actually break down the mechanics of a caregiver tax credit, because I find this fascinating.
Yeah, it's a very specific policy.
Instead of a family sending an aging parent to a state-funded nursing facility, which costs the government an absolute fortune, the family keeps the parent at home.
Right.
The state gives the family a tax credit in return, so it saves the state money and it directly helps the family.
It's a very targeted approach.
Yeah. This whole dynamic, it really reminds me of a clash of operating systems, like a CEO versus a doctor. Ramaswamy looks at Ohio like a distressed asset. He wants to slash overhead, cut taxes, consolidate schools, and let the free market correct itself.
Exactly.
But Acton looks at Ohio like an emergency room. You do not cut overhead in an ER. You triage the immediate bleeding. You treat the rising healthcare costs and the caregiving burdens. One treats the system, the other treats the symptoms.
That's a great way to put it. Voters essentially must decide what the state needs more, an economic overhaul or an emergency room triage.
And that emergency room triage philosophy takes us straight back to 2020, because Acton first gained national attention acting as the state's literal doctor during a massive crisis.
Yeah, the COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Mike DeWine actually appointed her as the director of the Ohio Department of Health back in 2019.
Right, and she served as the lone Democrat in his cabinet.
She did. And when the pandemic arrived, Acton became the literal face of Ohio's response. She stood next to Governor DeWine during those daily television briefings.
I remember those.
She advised the aggressive stay-at-home orders, she pushed to close schools, and she limited large gatherings.
And half the state completely revered her for it. I mean, people were printing T-shirts with her face on them.
They were. But the sources also detail a terrifying reality on the other side of that fame. She faced an intense, visceral backlash from right-wing activists.
Oh, it got really bad.
Armed protesters literally gathered outside her personal home in the suburbs. The pressure just reached a boiling point, and she resigned in June 2020.
And that resignation now serves as this central weapon in the 2026 campaign. Vivek Ramaswamy's running mate, Rob McCauley, he aggressively attacks Acton's pandemic record.
He really goes after it.
Yeah, he argues her lockdown policies destroyed small businesses, and he claims they artificially raised prices for everyone. And he specifically labels her a quitter for resigning when the pressure intensified.
Which is a very loaded word to use.
It is.
Yeah.
Because I look at her role during that time as a literal lightning rod. She absorbed the political voltage and the public fury, which effectively protected Governor DeWine.
Right.
And DeWine even defends her today. Despite endorsing Ramaswamy, DeWine recently stated about the lockdowns, and I'm quoting here, "The buck stops with me. They were my decisions."
He took full responsibility.
Right. So labeling her a quitter when guys with rifles are standing outside her living room window, I mean, is that just cynical politics, or does that attack actually land with voters?
Well, in political strategy, attacks do not actually need to be fair. They just need to plant a seed of doubt.
Okay, so it's about the narrative.
Exactly. By labeling her a quitter, her opponents question her fundamental resilience. They want voters asking, hey, if she folded under the pressure of the health department, how will she handle the immense stress of the governor's office?
That makes sense.
And Acton, she tries to pivot away from her pandemic fame. She highlights her Youngstown roots and her working-class grit.
But Ramaswamy's campaign won't let it go.
No, they will not let the pandemic go. They actively weaponize those 2020 lockdowns to define her character before she can set her own narrative.
You know, that intense public pressure cooker of 2020, it didn't just stay at the State House. It actually bled into her private life.
It really did.
Because if we look at a recently unearthed police report from right before the pandemic, we see the cracks forming under the weight of her demanding schedule. And this private controversy is currently dominating the news cycle.
Yeah, it's everywhere right now. The incident involves a police report from August 2019 at Acton's home in Bexley.
Okay.
Police responded to a domestic dispute between Acton and her husband.
And the details inside the report, they look incredibly damaging on paper.
Very damaging.
The report claims they argued over her long work hours. It states Acton pulled a mirror off the wall, shattering the glass. It even notes she told police she had been drinking and taking prescription drugs.
Right.
And then she reportedly tried to get in her car and drive away, but her husband physically stopped her. And when a medic arrived and recommended she go to the hospital, she refused.
Yeah, and the police specifically noted no physical violence occurred. It remained a verbal argument. But the optics, like you said, they are terrible.
But Acton's campaign aggressively disputes that police narrative. Right?
They do. They claim the details are either wrong or wildly out of context. They released a very specific counter-narrative.
What do they say happened?
They state she only had one drink at dinner and was absolutely not intoxicated. They clarified that the prescription drugs were just standard daily medications she had taken safely for years. They also claim she never pulled a mirror off the wall. They say she simply bumped into a wall hanging, causing it to fall. And most notably, they say by the time the police actually arrived at her house at 9:45 p.m., she was already asleep in bed.
Wow. Okay, so two totally different stories. And the fallout reached Governor DeWine immediately.
Oh, yeah. He told the press he was completely unaware this happened while she served in his cabinet. He actually expressed deep disappointment that she never disclosed the incident to him.
So now we get to watch the media ecosystem attempt to digest and spin this police report. And you see two completely different strategies playing out.
They're very different, yeah.
On one side, Breitbart published a detailed analysis questioning the timing of this release. They argue the left-leaning media purposely dropped this police report right now during the primary season.
Right.
They claim the goal is to clean out her closet early.
It acts like a controlled burn in a forest.
Explain that.
So firefighters start small fires on purpose to burn up the dry brush. That way, a massive wildfire cannot start later in the season.
Okay, that makes sense.
Breitbart suggests the media is starting a controlled burn. Dropping the story in the spring starves it of oxygen. By the time November rolls around, a 2019 police report feels like ancient history to the general election voter.
It's a really interesting theory. And then you look at how the voters themselves react on social media.
Oh, Reddit was buzzing.
Yeah. In the Ohio Reddit community, users immediately rushed to defend Acton. They called it a standard marital argument. But I struggle with how automatic their deflection feels.
What do you mean?
Well, they immediately pointed at Ramaswamy's past. They specifically brought up controversies surrounding an Alzheimer's disease drug that his biotech company worked on. So we no longer even debate the actual details of a broken mirror or a police visit. We just play scandal whataboutism.
Yeah, it's just throwing the opponent's baggage on the table to distract from our own. Both campaigns desperately work to manage the narrative of this police report.
Of course.
Acton's team wants to minimize it as just a stressful night from 7 years ago. Ramaswamy's team wants to maximize it as a pattern of instability.
This race is just an absolute whirlwind. I mean, you have a billionaire entrepreneur promising to eliminate taxes and run the government like a ruthless, efficient business.
Yeah.
And on the other side, you have a public health doctor who survived childhood poverty, promising to fix everyday affordability using targeted state power.
And both candidates carry massive baggage.
Mass.
Acton faces constant attacks over her lockdown policies and this newly revealed police report. Ramaswamy faces endless questions about his immense wealth and his past business deals.
And, you need to pay attention to this race even if you live 1,000 miles away from Ohio.
Absolutely, because this election serves as a critical bellwether for the rest of the country. Ohio voters are testing the exact arguments that will define national campaigns.
They really show us which way the wind is blowing.
Precisely. Do voters actually care about a candidate's personal wealth anymore? Does pandemic anger still drive voters to the polls, or has that outrage just faded? How do voters weigh a private, 7-year-old marital dispute against complex public policy plans regarding taxes and health care? The way Ohioans vote in this specific race will map out the future of American political strategy for the next decade.
It's wild to think about, and it honestly makes you wonder about the brutal personal cost of running for office today.
It's higher than ever.
It is. We demand our leaders fix massive systemic problems, but we dig into every single corner of their personal lives. Think about your own life for a second.
Yeah, really think about it.
In an era where a 7-year-old argument with your spouse or the individual mutual funds sitting in your retirement account become front-page news, who is actually left that is willing to run for public office?
It's a great question.
We go all the way back to the beginning, 62 cents in a checking account versus a private jet. It takes a very specific and maybe very unusual type of person to step into that arena today.